Pleiku Province, Vietnam, October 1972. The rain stopped just before dawn, leaving the air heavy and still. Smoke from the ammo dump drifted low across the runway, curling between the revetments where helicopters sat quiet and slick with rain. Camp Holloway looked abandoned, like a place waiting for someone to admit what had happened. They told us 3 men were missing, no names, just unaccounted for. The paperwork said they never left the perimeter. I knew that was wrong. I'd seen the grease pencil marks on the flight board before they erased them. The mission was logged in red, then gone by morning. A villager came through the gate carrying a broken camera, caked in mud and soot. He said he found it near the crash site. There wasn't supposed to be any crash. When I took it from him, the lens was cracked, but the film inside was still warm. That's when the air started humming again, low, steady, like a generator far underground. I remember thinking the storm had come back, but the sky stayed clear and the sound didn't fade. It was the same sound we'd heard the night before, right before the light. The rain that night came in slow, steady sheets. By 2100, the red clay around the revetments had turned to slick paste, thick enough to swallow a boot if you stood too long. Our compound lights were dimmed for blackout drills, so only the faint glow from the ops shack cut across the runway. I was on duty in the intel trailer, running through mission logs for the 189th Assault Helicopter Company. Most flights that week were routine cargo lifts and medevacs along Route 14. Nothing that would call for classified status. Then Major Collins came in with a sealed folder. No radio traffic, no manifest board updates, just a tight sheet marked field collection. The coordinates pointed west of Pleiku, near an area we'd mapped a dozen times for recon patrols. He told me to prep a temporary flight log, but not to record tail numbers. That was the first time I'd seen him nervous. The order came through the field line, not division. Our task was to assist a small ground element already inserted, supposedly recovering sensitive material. The code name on the sheet read Night Harvest. There were no supporting documents, no operation number, no authorization signatures. We launched 3 helicopters before midnight, 2 slicks for transport and 1 gunship for overwatch. I stayed at base, tasked with timekeeping and communications relay. The pilots called in after liftoff, routine voices, short check-ins. Radio clarity held fine until 2300 hours. Then, without warning, static. No call signs, no break. Just an electric hum. It wasn't like interference from storms. It had rhythm, slow, even pulses, like breathing. By 0100, we'd lost contact entirely. Collins told me to erase the temporary flight log. He said it was a routine field malfunction and that the birds would set down once the storm cleared. But the weather report showed no active storm cells within 50 miles. At dawn, the villagers arrived. They were calm, quiet people, usually stayed clear of our perimeter. This time one came straight to the guard post, carrying a mud-soaked satchel. Inside was the broken foreign camera, heavier than it looked, black casing scratched but intact. The lens was cracked across, and there was a faint burnt smell, not like smoke, more like scorched wiring. Collins and I developed the film ourselves in the photo shack behind the hangar. The frames came out uneven, some washed, others sharp as glass. They showed a North Vietnamese recon team moving through the jungle. 5 men. No weapons ready, just carrying film gear. Their faces weren't strained like soldiers in combat. They were watching something. In the distance behind the trees, faint light, whitish blue, blurred and steady. In the second to last frame, one of the recon men turned toward the camera. His mouth was open, eyes wide. The last frame cut mid-motion. No burst, no flash, just half of a silhouette and a smear of brightness. When the film ended, Collins didn't speak. He tore the strip out, folded it in a manila envelope, and said he'd file it directly to command. I asked if it was enemy equipment. He just said, not ours either. That night, he wrote a full field report. I saw the first paragraph before he closed the folder. It read, Enemy recon unit observed documenting unidentified crash object. Possible advanced technology. The report never had a reader. By morning, the courier bag was empty. The following day, new reassignment orders arrived for Collins' temporary posting to Tan Son Nhut. He left that afternoon. His flight landed. He didn't. I learned later from a pilot friend that his chopper diverted south for refuel and was redirected mid-air by men in civilian dress. No one saw him again. The base went quiet after that. The ops shack stayed locked. The men whispered about the missing crew, but nobody filed a complaint. When I asked about our pilots, the duty officer said they'd been transferred to another mission. No names, no paperwork. The rain came again 2 nights later. The same smell, mud, burnt wire, something dry and sharp under it. The hum returned on the comms line even with the power cut. I logged the frequency and waited. That was when the second order came through, this time direct from battalion. A recovery team was going out to search the same coordinates, west ridge of Pleiku. I was listed as attached observer. We lifted off at 1900 the next evening in 2 Hueys. The air smelled of wet fuel and rusted metal, heavy enough to sting the nose. I rode with the forward element, 6 men, none from our company. Their uniforms were clean, no patches, no names. The only marking was a small black square sewn where their unit tag should be. They spoke little, all business, moving with the precision of men who already knew where they were going. Our orders were simple: locate the missing team, retrieve any sensitive equipment, and burn the site if recovery was impossible. No mention of the camera or what had been filmed. I carried a field camera, a notebook, and my map board. The pilot called our approach point Echo Ridge, though no such place was on our maps. The flight was short, less than 15 minutes. We flew low over the tree line, blades chopping mist that still clung to the valleys. Through the open door, the jungle looked calm. No flares, no movement, no trace of firefight. Yet the closer we came to the coordinates, the more the air turned electric. My headset picked up faint static, not the usual burst from radio chatter, but a single tone that deepened with each mile. The crew chief adjusted dials, cursed softly, and gave up. We sat down in a narrow clearing near a stream. Steam rose off the ground as if the soil was cooling after heat. The men disembarked quickly, forming a tight perimeter. I followed, staying close to the sergeant in charge, a tall man with a thick jaw and no visible rank. He spoke once, quietly, no souvenirs. No chatter, stay close. We moved east, following a faint trail cut through tall grass. The smell of burned vegetation lingered, sharp and unnatural, like melted insulation. After about 300 yards, we reached a shallow crater, no wider than a small hut. The trees around it were scorched halfway up, but there was no sign of fire spread, just a clean circle, soil fused like glass. At the center lay twisted fragments of something metallic, thinner than sheet steel yet heavier to the touch. The sergeant told 2 men to secure samples. He walked the edge of the crater, scanning the tree line. I noticed something buried near the rim part of a boot, half sunk in mud. It was American issue. The sole was intact, but the leather looked cooked from inside out. No body, just the boot. We found the first body 30 minutes later, lying face down in the stream bed. No wounds, no blood. The skin was pale, veins dark like ink under the surface. Dog tags were missing. His rifle still slung across his shoulder, safety on. It was as if he'd fallen asleep standing and collapsed. One of the men radioed back using a scrambled frequency. He didn't use call signs, only said, "Package confirmed. Condition 2. The voice on the other end gave a short reply. I couldn't hear clearly, but the tone sounded flat, synthetic. By 2100, we had gathered what they called evidence metal fragments, melted soil cores, 1 helmet liner with unknown residue. They wrapped everything in black vinyl bags marked with chalk numbers. I noticed the count skip between 4 and 6. I asked about 5. The sergeant stared at me for a second and said, "We didn't find number 5. As we prepared to move back, the hum returned. It wasn't from the radio this time. It came from the ground, faint but steady, like a hidden engine buried beneath us. The men froze. The sergeant raised a hand and mouthed, "Hold." The hum climbed to a low vibration that trembled in my chest. The stream rippled against the stones, though no wind blew. Then, as quick as it started, it stopped. One of the black badge men muttered something about residual output and told us to move fast. We loaded the samples and began the walk back. The jungle was quiet, too quiet, even for that hour. No insects, no night calls. Just our boots and the occasional click of safety levers. When we reached the clearing, the pilots were waiting with engines idling low. The sergeant handed them the final bags and gave coordinates for an alternate drop zone, somewhere closer to Pleiku, but not Holloway. I overheard delivery to Sable handlers before the blades drowned the rest. Back at base, the story changed again. The recovery was labeled Fuel Explosion Investigation. No mention of bodies, no mention of wreckage. The samples vanished from inventory before dawn. I wrote my report, filed it under Night Harvest, and locked it in the intel safe. By morning, the safe had been cleaned out. Only my notebook remained, open to a blank page. 2 days later, a technician from photo analysis went missing. His name was Carl Harris. He'd been the one who helped us process the first roll of film. The MPs found his bunk empty, gear still there, and a single note on his desk. Not enemy. Not ours. The base commander told us to stop asking questions. We went back to routine flights, resupply, medevac, patrol runs like before. But every time the night went still and the air smelled of wet wire, I heard that low hum again. And each time I remembered the boot in the mud and the way the light had no sound. The week after the recovery, Holloway turned uneasy. Men kept to themselves, mess hall chatter faded, and nobody asked about the missing flights anymore. The weather stayed the same: low clouds, light rain, nights colder than usual for that time of year. The sound of the generators carried farther than it should have. Every time the power flickered, the hum followed, faint but steady, as if buried under the ground somewhere near the southern perimeter. I was moved off normal intel duty and told to assist in document reclassification. That meant taking old reports and typing new versions with altered details. Coordinates changed by 1 digit, times shifted an hour or two, names swapped for initials. I was careful with each one, but even doing it felt wrong, like wiping out the last trace of what we'd seen. When I finished, a man in plain uniform, no insignia, took the stack and left without signing the release sheet. The following night, the base went dark. Total blackout. No announcement, no incoming threat. Only a brief message over intercom: power test, maintain position. I was in the photo shack reviewing aerial reels from a routine recon flight. The film should have shown farmland north of Pleiku, but the frames came out distorted. Half the reel was black static, the other half filled with bursts of light bluish-white flashes that repeated every few seconds. The timing matched the pulses from the comms hum. I checked the timestamps. They lined up exactly with the night of the recovery. I went to see Sergeant Whitaker from maintenance. He had been on standby during that mission, kept the choppers running and the gunship ready. When I told him about the film, he didn't act surprised. He said 2 nights after the operation, one of the test drones they'd lost contact with months earlier had been found crashed in the same valley. He wasn't supposed to tell me, but he said the wreckage had been stripped bare by the time his team arrived. The onboard camera, however, still had a fragment of film inside. Whitaker let me see it. Only 1 frame had survived the fire. It showed jungle under moonlight, the same ridge we'd landed on. In the center of the frame, a faint arc of metal or light, hard to tell which, rose above the tree line. And there, at the edge of the image, was the shadow of a man stretched across the ground. The strange part was the angle. The light came from behind him, but his shadow fell forward. Whitaker said the drone had no light system installed. He burned the photo after I left, afraid it might be traced. I couldn't let it go. I spent nights rechecking map overlays and flight logs. The pattern made no sense. The coordinates of the recovery site, the supposed crash point of the drone, and the last recorded position of the missing crew formed a narrow triangle, all within 2 miles. Something had drawn both sides, ours and theirs, to the same place at the same time. A week later, a group of men arrived by convoy, unmarked trucks, plain fatigues, no rank, no badges. They carried cases stamped with yellow triangles and requested full access to the hangars. One of them asked for me by name. He said they needed the original negatives from the foreign camera. I told him they'd been confiscated. He smiled, not kindly, and said, "We know who has them." That night, the tech from communications, young kid, always smoked too much, found a strip of magnetic tape inside the old signal relay box near the runway. He brought it to me, thinking it was training material. When we played it, the tape carried the same low hum that had haunted our comms since the mission. But beneath it, faintly, was another sound. Breathing. Slow, uneven, almost human. Then a voice, short and clipped, like a half-heard radio call. Leave it where it fell. The next day, the comms kid was gone. His bunk empty, locker open. The sergeant on duty said he'd been reassigned to NA Trang, but nobody saw him leave. Rumors spread fast. Some said the crash had been a spy satellite, others said Russian. A few whispered about chemical tests gone wrong. But none of that matched what I'd seen. The melted soil, the light without heat, the bodies without burns. One night, I sat by the runway, map on my knees, tracing every step of the operation. The air smelled like burnt copper again. The hum came faintly from the hills carried by the wind. I realized then it wasn't random interference. It pulsed at the same intervals every time. Long, short, long. Almost like it was signaling. Around 0200, I saw a glow on the horizon, pale and shifting behind the trees. It wasn't a flare or lightning. It moved with slow rhythm, rising and falling like breath. The same color as in the film. I should have called it in, but I didn't. I just sat there, listening. The hum grew stronger, the glow brighter. For a moment, I thought I heard footsteps in the grass behind me, heavy but unhurried. I turned. Nothing. Only the faint smell of burnt wire again. By morning, the glow was gone. But the next shift said they'd picked up a radio signal from the west, same frequency as ours, same encryption, same call signs. The voice on the other end was calm. It gave coordinates for extraction. Those coordinates belonged to the missing team's last known position. We sent a patrol to verify. They never checked in. The command log for that night was left blank. After the second patrol vanished, Holloway slipped into silence. No sirens, no search orders, no briefings. It was as if the command decided those men never existed. We still flew our daily runs, but no one spoke on the headsets unless necessary. Even the sound of the rotors felt heavier, slower, as if the air had thickened since that night. I started keeping my own notes, hidden inside the cover of a flight chart. Coordinates, radio anomalies, changes in routine. Every evening, I marked the times when the hum returned. It always began just after dusk, lasted 7 minutes, then faded to nothing. The same rhythm every time. A few of us met quietly in the mess tent to talk it over. Whitaker, a medic named Alvarez, and me. Alvarez said the bodies we'd found during the recovery had been taken straight to a refrigerated truck that left before dawn. No autopsy, no paperwork. He had looked inside one of the bags. He said the skin on the bodies wasn't burned. It was translucent, like wax left too close to a lamp. The eyes were gone. Not gouged, just missing. He swore the sockets were smooth, sealed shut under the skin. After that night, he stopped coming to the tent. 2 days later, he was airlifted to Saigon for reassignment. We never saw him again. The men in black uniforms stayed longer. They avoided our barracks but watched everything. One night, I saw them carrying long metal cases from the hangar to a truck marked with no numbers. They moved fast and worked in silence. I caught a glimpse inside one of the cases as it passed under a light. Whatever was inside wasn't mechanical. It looked organic, folded, pale, almost like wet leather. I tried to write to Collins, assuming he'd made it to Tan Son Newt. My letter came back stamped recipient not found. The envelope was opened, resealed, and smelled faintly of ozone and wet paper. Then came the tests. They started taking soil and air samples from different sectors of the base. I was called to assist, told to log coordinates for environmental calibration. The scientists, or whatever they were, wore suits that hissed when they moved. One of them told me not to breathe too deep when near the south fence. I asked why. He just said, residual trace. A week later, a maintenance crew repairing a fuel line near the same area found a large metal fragment buried under the mud. It was about the size of a Jeep door, curved, and so smooth it reflected light even in the dark. They called me to photograph it. When I got there, the piece was half sunk in the earth, humming faintly, same pitch as the sound from our comms. When I touched it, the vibration passed up my arm. Cold, but alive in some way, I took 3 photos before they covered it with canvas and loaded it into a truck. The next morning, my negatives were gone from the lab. That night, I walked the fence line alone. The sky was clouded, but the jungle glowed faintly in the distance. Same strange, slow pulse. The smell hit me again. Wet soil, burnt wire, and something metallic, almost like blood left in rain. The sound followed soon after, soft and steady, coming from the direction of the ridge. When I returned to the barracks, a folder lay on my bunk. No name, just a plain manila cover. Inside were 3 black and white photos. The first was one of our choppers sitting half buried in mud, rotor blades twisted. The second was the same clearing I'd seen in the film from the foreign camera. But this time, there was no light, only a hole in the ground, perfectly round, edges charred. The third photo stopped me cold. It was of me, sitting at my desk in the intel shack, taken from outside through the window. Someone had been watching. The next morning, command ordered a full evacuation drill for safety inspection. Half the personnel were shipped out within hours. Those who remained, including me, were told to guard the perimeter until further notice. I watched trucks roll out toward the west gate, same black uniforms, same sealed crates. The hum returned as they left, louder this time, strong enough to make the tin roofs tremble. At dusk, the generator lights flickered, then cut out. The air filled with that dry charge again, like before lightning but without the flash. I heard distant rotor noise, but it wasn't from our birds. The sound came in short bursts, high-pitched, like turbines spooling without load. The men near the tower swore they saw something lift from the jungle line, silver, oval, silent. It hovered for less than a minute, then tilted and slid straight up into the clouds. No flame, no noise, just gone. After that, the power came back. The officers said nothing. The next day, the official record listed the event as a false radar return. That night, I found Whitaker sitting by the hangar doors, staring at the dark runway. He said one sentence before standing up and walking away. It never touched the ground. He left camp before sunrise. From then on, Holloway wasn't a base anymore. It was a waiting place. Every order came from voices we never saw. Every document already typed before we received it. The men still saluted, still drilled, still flew, but it all felt like acting after the story had already ended. And each night, that hum reminded me the ending hadn't been ours to write. By the third week of October, everything inside Camp Holloway felt off balance. Orders kept changing mid-sentence. Flight schedules were erased and rewritten before the ink dried. Even the weather reports stopped matching the sky. Every morning began with mist, though the monsoon had already ended. Then one morning, a new face showed up in the mess. He wore captain's bars but no unit patch. Said he was from engineering oversight. The name he gave, Redding, didn't match any roster. He kept to himself most of the time, but one night he came to my bunk and asked quietly if I still had the original prints. I didn't answer. He smiled like he already knew. Then he said something strange. It wasn't a crash. It was a landing that never stopped. He walked away before I could reply. The next evening, I was called to the southern perimeter to photograph something the guards had found. The air there felt thin, charged. The ground near the fence had sunk overnight, forming a shallow depression about 20 feet wide. The grass around it was singed but not burned, and in the center a faint shimmer hung in the air like heat mirage but cold to the touch. My camera lens fogged when pointed toward it. Through the viewfinder, the light bent wrong, as if the air itself was folding. A corporal reached out with a stick, and the wood blackened at the tip without flame. We stepped back. The hum started again, deeper this time, almost like a voice trying to shape itself through vibration. The fence post rattled. The shimmer pulsed once, then disappeared, leaving only the smell of ozone and damp soil. I sent the photographs for development. They came out blank except for one. An overexposed frame that showed faint lines across the sky, vertical and sharp, as though something enormous had been hovering above us just out of sight. The duty officer confiscated the negatives the same hour. That night, I dreamt of the clearing again, the one from the film, but this time, the faces of the recon team were replaced with ours. Same poses, same expressions. Eyes wide, frozen mid-turn. I woke with the taste of metal in my mouth and my right arm numb from shoulder to wrist. When I went to the medic, he checked me over and said the nerves looked fine. He asked if I'd been near any power sources. I said no. Then he hesitated and said quietly, "You're not the first." 3 more men reported the same symptoms that week. Loss of feeling in the arms or face, dizziness, sudden headaches that left a high-pitched ring in the ears. The base doctors called it heat fatigue. But there hadn't been heat in days. 2 nights later, while logging new radio traffic, I intercepted a transmission marked as encrypted local. The voice on the line used one of our old call signs, Falcon 2. That was one of the birds lost on the first mission. The signal came from somewhere west of the ridge, the same triangle I'd mapped before. The voice said, calm and clear, extraction complete. Standing by for relay. Then silence. I replayed it again and again, convinced it was interference. But the timestamp matched the pattern of the hum. The missing crew's call sign had returned after 3 weeks. The next morning, I went to Redding's office. His desk was empty, papers cleared, chair pushed in neat. The wall clock had stopped at 0317. The air inside the room smelled faintly of that same burned wire scent. No one admitted seeing him leave. I found a folded map under the desk blotter. It showed the route from the base to Echo Ridge, drawn with black marker. At the top corner, written in pencil, were 3 words, "They never left." That night, we received orders to seal the southern perimeter and prepare for a containment inspection. Trucks arrived before sunrise, same black fatigues, same faces. They carried new equipment, small metallic rods with blinking lights, and planted them around the sunken ground. The rods pulsed in rhythm, perfectly timed with the hum. The officer in charge told us to stand 50 yards back. Then they activated something. The rods connected in a faint arc of light, enclosing the area like a cage. The hum changed pitch, rising sharply until the air trembled. A shadow appeared in the middle, tall, human-shaped but without edges, as if it was made of air and light at once. One of the men stepped closer, raised his hand in salute, then dropped to the ground without sound. The shadow flickered and vanished. The rods went dark. They loaded the man's body into a crate and left. The soil where he fell stayed cold the rest of the day. We were told it was an accident with field testing equipment. No mention of the figure, no mention of the rods. That night, the hum didn't stop. It stayed constant, low, like a heartbeat under the earth. The metal sheets on the barracks walls vibrated softly until morning. Nobody slept. By the next sunset, the air smelled of rain again, though no clouds gathered. The light seemed thicker, slower. Radios picked up faint whispers between bursts of static, our own voices, repeating things we'd said earlier in the day. That was when I realized it wasn't just the jungle that was echoing. Something was replaying us. It began on the night of November 2nd. The rain had stopped for good, leaving the air heavy and unmoving. The hills beyond the camp were dark, except for one faint light that blinked at uneven intervals. Command said it was a flare from a downed bird, though no flights had gone up that evening. At 2100, the base alarm tripped once, then died mid-tone. Power went out across the compound. I was in the intel shack filing my last notes under a lamp when it flickered and burst. The hum filled the silence, deep and steady, shaking the floorboards under my boots. Radios came alive on their own static, layered with what sounded like distant voices, slow and blurred, repeating old call signs. Falcon 2, Echo 3, voices of men who should have been gone weeks ago. Outside, the searchlights flickered to life without power. Their beams swung toward the south perimeter, then froze, locked on something beyond the fence. I grabbed my field camera and ran out. The night smelled of damp iron and burnt ozone. A thin mist rolled across the ground, glowing faintly from within. At the fence line, the light grew brighter, spreading like a silent dawn. The men on watch stood still, rifles lowered. Through the haze, shapes moved tall, slow, and human in outline. But they didn't walk right. Their steps were long and weightless, as if the ground gave way beneath them and pushed them forward again. I counted 5 shapes, maybe 6. The hum rose higher, shaking the metal in my teeth. One of the floodlights snapped, throwing sparks. For an instant, I saw the figures clear. Their faces were smooth, features drawn tight like the wax bodies Alvarez described. Their skin shimmered faintly, as though lit from inside. They stopped just beyond the wire. Then one raised its arm and pointed at us. The air cracked, no sound, but a sudden pressure that bent the knees of every man on the line. A blinding flash followed blue-white, same light as on the film. My camera went dark, lens burned black. When I opened my eyes, the figures were gone. Only the hum remained, fading slow. The ground where they'd stood smoked lightly, marked by 6 narrow impressions in perfect rows. Each depression was the same length boot long but deeper than a man's weight could press. The commanding officer ordered a lockdown. All communications were cut. The blackout lasted until morning. When power returned, the fence was replaced with new panels, thicker wire, no explanation. At dawn, they gathered the men from the southern perimeter, lined us up outside the hangar, and read our names. Those who'd been nearest the lights were separated. They were told to pack and report for medical screening at Containment. The trucks left within the hour. None returned. Inside the hangar, a team of men worked around a single covered object the size of a trailer. They moved with care, using tongs and lead-lined gloves. When I got close, I felt that same vibration again, faint through the floor, like the object itself was breathing. One of the workers noticed me, his face pale under the light. He said quietly, "Don't stay here long." It remembers. That afternoon, I found the medic log for the southern line. Each name had been crossed out, replaced with the word transferred. No medical codes, no destinations. The final line read, "Subject exposure complete." The sky stayed white that whole day, the kind of glare that made everything look flat. By sunset, the hum was gone, but something else had changed. Birds stopped flying over the base, even the dogs went quiet. That night, the unmarked trucks came again. I watched them from the shadows by the fuel depot. They loaded the covered object, sealed it, and drove out through the east gate. The lead truck's brake lights flickered, and for an instant I saw the shape beneath the tarp round edges, smooth surface, a faint shimmer like moonlight underwater. I followed them as far as the bend past the airstrip. The trucks turned off their lights once they hit the dirt road and vanished into the trees. I stood there until the hum began again, far off, rolling like thunder that never broke. When I returned, my bunk had been emptied. My nameplate removed. By the next morning, Holloway was barely a base. Half the barracks stood empty, doors swinging in the wind. The air carried that dry metallic scent again, like copper left in rain. Every few hours, the ground trembled faintly, almost in rhythm, as if something deep beneath us was turning slow and steady. I was reassigned without being told. My order simply said, Observation Detail, Field Sector South. When I reached the old perimeter, the new fence stretched farther out, enclosing what had been jungle a week before. Inside, the ground had been cleared, packed hard, and covered with tarps held down by steel cables. The rods with the blinking lights were back, forming a wide circle around the same spot where the shimmer had appeared. A team of men worked there, some in fatigues, some in protective suits. They moved quietly, the radios hissing with constant background noise. I was told to keep a visual log from a small tower overlooking the site. No photos, no notes leaving the post. At 2000 hours, the hum started again, louder than ever. The rods glowed, then dimmed, as if struggling against something unseen. The tarp in the center began to ripple, slow at first, then faster, lifting in places like wind moving beneath it. One of the men below shouted, but the sound vanished mid-word. The tarp tore free, and a white light bled through the hole. The air vibrated hard enough to shake my teeth. The light rose higher, folding in on itself, a column turning like water caught in a drain. Within it, shapes moved, shadows twisting inside brightness. I couldn't tell if they were human or not. Then, all at once, the light collapsed inward, pulling air and dust with it, leaving a hollow thud that pressed against my chest. When the brightness faded, something else stood there. Not the smooth metal we'd seen before. This was fractured, open, like a shell cracked from within. The men in suits approached, carrying long instruments. They circled it, taking readings, until one of them stopped and pointed. Inside the broken shell lay a body. I climbed down before they could stop me. It was a soldier, uniform torn, dog tags half melted to the fabric. The tag read, Harris. The same technician who'd vanished weeks ago. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and his eyes were closed. No wounds, no burns. His chest rose once, a shallow breath, then stopped. The officer in charge barked for the team to remove me. Two men grabbed my arms, but before they could drag me away, Harris's body let out a low sound. Not a gasp, not speech, but the same hum we'd heard in the wires. The lights on the rods flared white, and every radio within range went dead. When I woke, it was daylight. The field was empty. No rods, no shell, no body. Just churned earth and the smell of burnt metal hanging low in the mist. My camera was gone, my wristwatch frozen at 0317, the same time as the stop clock in Redding's office. They said later there'd been a fuel explosion near the south fence, nothing else. The casualty report listed one dead from heat exposure, no names. I tried to find out who had written it, but the signature line was blank. That night, I packed what little I had left, a notebook, the burned negatives, and the single frame I'd hidden months before. Then I walked out through the north gate. No one stopped me. The guards at the post didn't even look up. As I reached the end of the road, I heard the hum again, distant this time, like memory. It faded slow, buried under the sound of the wind. For a moment, I thought I saw a pale glow on the ridge, rising behind the tree line, but it was gone before I could be sure. And with it, whatever was left of Camp Holloway. I reached Pleiku the next evening, hitching a ride with a convoy heading east. The soldiers in the trucks barely spoke, eyes fixed on the road. I didn't blame them. The sky behind us glowed faintly, a dull wash like a sunrise that refused to end. No one looked back. When we stopped for fuel, I went to the field office to sign my transfer papers. The clerk took one look at my orders, then at me, and quietly said, "You were at Holloway." It wasn't a question. He stamped the forms, slid them into a folder marked restricted, and told me to wait outside. 15 minutes later, two men in plain khaki arrived. They said they were from Division Intelligence. Their vehicle had no plates. They asked me a few simple questions: how many men remained at the camp when I'd last seen Major Collins, if I had any personal film or notes. I told them no. They nodded, thanked me for my service, and said I'd be reassigned once the review ended. That was the last time anyone mentioned Holloway to my face. Over the next month, I drifted between small airfields, Kontum, NK, Da Nang, filing weather reports and inventory lists. Every few days, I'd see names I recognized from Holloway appear on rosters, marked transferred, then disappear by the following week. No forwarding units, no confirmation of discharge, just erased. One night, while cleaning gear, I found a slip of paper folded inside my map case. It wasn't mine. The handwriting was tight, deliberate. 3 words only: Project Sable secured. There was no signature. I burned the note, but the smell it left in the air, ozone and clay, was the same as the ridge. By December, I was sent back stateside for debrief. They sat me in a small room with a recorder on the table and asked me to walk through the explosion at Camp Holloway. I kept my story clean: a fuel accident, a lost team, a storm that disrupted communications. The officer leading the session stopped me halfway through. He said, "You understand this never leaves this room." I nodded. He switched off the recorder and said, almost softly, "You did well to forget." When I stepped outside, a cold wind hit hard. The sky was empty, no stars, just the low drone of a distant aircraft heading east. I couldn't shake the sense that the vibration under my boots was the same one I'd felt that night: deep, steady, alive. Over the years, I tried to put it behind me. Worked a few civilian contracts, raised a family, kept my head down, but every now and then, something would bring it back. A certain smell after rain, a low power line hum, a reflection off metal that didn't catch the sun right. The kind of moments that drag old memories out whether you want them or not. In '75, I read a small article about a classified recovery unit called Project Sable. The line described it as a rapid response group for the retrieval of unidentified foreign materials. The date of formation, early 1973. I didn't need to read more. Holloway had been their beginning. That night, I took the burned photo, the one Harris had hidden, and looked at it under a desk lamp. The image had degraded, edges browned, but the reflection in the soldier's visor was still visible. The same blue-white glow. A shape in the background, curved like a wing, but too smooth, too clean for any craft we knew. I put the photo back in its envelope and locked it away again. For years, I kept waiting for someone to knock, for another quiet interview, another routine follow-up, but no one came. Holloway had been wiped clean from the maps. Even the local villagers said the ground there was cursed, plants wouldn't grow right, water turned metallic after rain. Still, I sometimes thought about the men who vanished, the ones taken from the line, the ones loaded into those unmarked trucks. Where they ended up, I'll never know, but I can still hear that low hum if I sit still long enough. It doesn't come from outside anymore. It's somewhere inside, faint but steady, same rhythm as before. And it starts every time I think of that light. In the spring of 1974, I received a letter with no return address. The envelope was military issue, edges trimmed clean, paper too heavy for civilian mail. Inside was a single sheet of carbon copy marked Archive Notification. It said my records from Camp Holloway had been transferred to permanent storage under Project Sable authority. No location given, no contact name. I took it as a warning, not a notice. A few months later, I heard through a pilot buddy that the site had been dismantled. Bulldozers leveled the runways, hangars stripped for metal. What couldn't be moved was buried under concrete. They said a civilian construction crew handled it, but the workers were flown in under false contracts and flown out again before sunrise. One of them, a mechanic named Doyle, tracked me down years later in a VFW bar outside Houston. He'd recognized my name from an old crate he'd helped load. Said it was stamped Holloway Material Recovery. He told me about a hole they found while digging foundations. Wide as a helicopter pad, perfectly round, glassed at the edges. Every time their machines worked near it, the engines cut out, even when unplugged. He said the company foreman poured concrete over it in silence and left it off the blueprints. I asked if he remembered what the ground smelled like. He looked at me funny, then said, "Ozone," like a storm was hiding underground. After that, I stopped asking questions. For a long time, I believed the story had ended there, that the field was sealed, the film gone, the truth buried under bureaucracy and concrete. Then, in the mid-'80s, a journalist named Anna McBride contacted me. She said she was writing about unrecorded operations during the Vietnam years. Her tone told me she already knew more than she should. We met once in a diner outside Kansas City. She carried a folder of declassified scraps, all bearing the same header, Project Sable Pleiku Incident. Most pages were blacked out, but a few lines stood clear enough to read. One said, "Subject recovered. Composition unknown. Radiation minimal. Cognitive field effect possible." Another listed 6 names under the title Human Exposure Candidates. Mine was 5th. Anna promised to keep my identity off the record. She wanted to compare what I remembered with what she'd found. I told her everything minus the photo. She left with a quiet nod, said she'd call after her next lead. She never did. A month later, her car was found off a back road near Junction City. The paper called it a mechanical failure. After her death, I stopped trusting coincidences. Now, 50 years on, I keep my own archive. Not for proof, not for exposure. Just to have something that still connects the pieces. The photo, the torn map from Redding's office, and one page from my original log, the one with times and coordinates crossed out by another hand. Sometimes, I trace the marks and wonder if they were trying to change where we'd been or when. They never reopened the case, never acknowledged the loss. Holloway remains a blank space in every official ledger, as if an entire section of history had been folded out of view. But at night, when the power lines hum outside my window and rain hits the tin roof just right, I can almost hear it again, that same low pulse, rising slow, fading steady, like something deep beneath the earth still breathing. Whatever it was, it never stopped. It's been half a century since that night, yet some sounds never fade. I still wake before dawn when the house is quiet, the kind of silence that has weight. Sometimes the hum is there, soft, steady, buried under the wiring of the walls. It's not loud enough to scare me anymore. It's more like an old signal that never found its way home. I've read every account I could find. None mention Camp Holloway by name, but I can see its outline between the lines. Pleiku, an unnamed crash, lost personnel, sealed operations. They talk about recovery teams, about containment, about memory damage and exposed witnesses. I know what that means. I used to think it was all erased to protect secrets, but now I believe it was something else. Maybe what we saw wasn't meant to be remembered at all. Maybe that's why the records disappear, the people vanish, the ground refuses to hold new life. When I close my eyes, I still see the ridge-wet grass, faint glow behind the trees, and the way that light bent around us without touching the air. I remember the men who stood there and never came back, and the silence that followed once the hum died down. If anyone ever finds what's left under that concrete, I hope they stop digging. Some things don't want to be uncovered twice, and if you ever hear a low hum on a still night, don't look for its source. Walk away. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. And for more amazing horror stories, just click the ones showing right now on your screen.